I'm really pumped to be bringing you this episode today because I'm going to be giving an update on our air layering experiment that we've been doing with this beautiful Monstera elbow. Now, spoiler alert, I've had a quick peek at the bottom of this side and there is plenty of root development. So I'm really pumped to show you what's been going on in this little container here. So let's get into it. Okay, so for those of you who are just joining us on this journey, here's a quick rundown of what we've done to set up this experiment. So as you can see, we've got this beautiful mature Monstera elbow here. What we're attempting to do is develop an entire root system in here off one of the aerial roots while it is still attached to the main plant. Now there are plenty of benefits in doing it this way. If you want to learn for yourself what those benefits are, I encourage you to check out the earlier videos in this journey, because that's where we go through all the different benefits and essentially why this is one of my favorite low risk propagation strategies for Monsteras. Now it's a very simple setup. We've simply created a humidity chamber around an aerial root with a growing medium, and in this case I'm using sphagnum moss. It's around the 6.5 week mark of this experiment, so we're hoping to see plenty of root development. So I'm going to pull out all the moss from this propagation container and I'll be back to show you what kind of activity we've had with this aerial root. Okay, now would you get a look at that? That is phenomenal root growth after 6.5 weeks. You can see there is just a massive root ball down here, and I am super excited to see how many roots on roots on roots we have. Now you can see here is the main aerial root that we originally saw curling its way around the bottom, and you can see it has shot off secondary roots, and even those secondary roots have developed further roots off them. So for me, this is an extremely healthy root ball. You can see the beautiful new growth and new root development going on at the tips, and look, there looks to be a little bit of darkish roots here. This stuff is normal, but this one here looks a little bit concerning. So I might clean this root ball up and actually get rid of that. And if I'm overly concerned, if I see a bit more potential areas that are rotting, then I may also spray in a little bit of hydrogen peroxide just to be safe and get rid of any of the unwanted bacteria. But if I bring you in for a closer look of the top of the roots, you can see that most of the root development was happening around the base of the container. But if I show you here, you can actually see that the roots are starting to grow upwards. Now I know it's a bit hard to see with all the sphagnum moss around, but I can assure you that there's a new root here, 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 and you can tell by the development of the really kind of whitish yellow tips, more roots here and here and here. So this is fantastic news. I'm really happy to see the progress of this, and if I really wanted to right now, I will be very comfortable in potting this up into some aroid mix, because this is showing me really healthy root development over just the past 2 weeks. And so once this guy's comfortable in its aroid mix and continuing with its root development, the next step would be to go in for the chop and propagate this guy. So I would essentially cut here and here between the two aerial roots and ensuring that I've got a node in there. I would definitely call this a success, but if you're an experienced plant parent, you'll know not all things go to plan. And there's been a little bit of a development with this Monstera elbow. Since the last update, this Monstera elbow has decided to shoot out a new leaf. Now I'll try and get you in for a close look at it. This new leaf has popped out. Now I don't want to touch it too much because new leaves are very sensitive and very soft, and that could cause a bit of damage to the leaf. So hopefully you can see it here. There it is. So now that this plant has decided to develop a new leaf, what we might do is hold off on the chop and prop. Like I said earlier, the development of this root ball has exceeded my expectations at the 6.5 week mark. It is a really robust root ball, and I'd be more than happy to plant it in some soil. So rather than chopping this plant up while it's pushing out this new leaf and causing it a bit of unnecessary stress, I might put this experiment back into place. So refill the propagation container with some damp sphagnum moss, leave it for a couple of weeks, and by that time this new leaf should be out and hopefully starting to harden. And then at that point, before it starts to shoot out another new leaf, that's when I'll go in for the chop and prop. So let's get this aerial root back into sphagnum moss, let this beautiful plant do its thing before we move on to the next steps of this experiment. Now, I'm not going to bore you with showing you again how I repacked the sphagnum moss. If you want to see how I did that the last time, click on the link in the top left hand corner, or I'll put a link in the description below for the last episode, because that's where I went through a few tips on when you're repacking the sphagnum moss. It's quite important, otherwise you could put the whole propagation at jeopardy by encouraging root rot. I quickly remembered that I wanted to remove this little suspect root that looks like it's got a bit of rot on it. Give you a bit more of a close-up of this root. You can see it's actually quite dark and looks to be quite slimy and mushy, and that pretty much indicates that this guy is starting to rot. Now, that could be because it was in an area of the container that just wasn't getting enough air and was sitting in too much water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop it off. I'm definitely going to keep an eye on this guy. So I may check in a bit earlier than the 2-week mark, just to make sure that this root ball doesn't develop any rot, because it would be such a waste to see all this root development go to waste. So what you want to do is, with a pair of sterilized garden scissors, you just want to make sure that you cut pretty far back from the area of the rot, just so you make sure you get all of the rot. And it's pretty much a snip. You can see the rotten piece there. Yeah, it's pretty much well rotted and it's on its way. We're actually pretty lucky that we caught it so early, because this could be a little bit of a disaster if we let it go any longer. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get rid of all the sphagnum moss that I took out from the propagation container. And here's all the sphagnum moss. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all this sphagnum moss, just to be sure that we get rid of all the bacteria, and I'm going to replace it with some fresh sphagnum moss. Okay, so there you have it. That's a 6.5-week update on this air layering propagation experiment that we're doing with this beautiful Monstera albo. As you saw, fantastic root development, but unfortunately not as expected because of this new growth that we're seeing. This new growth is not bad news, but it does throw a little bit of a spanner in the works for our experiment, but definitely exciting times for this Monstera albo. Plenty of positive signs with root development, aerial roots, and new leaf growth. Thanks for tuning in, and as we always say at the Garden Benchtop, go get your hands dirty. See ya!